Hello class, and welcome to module 4 of this course. And in this module we are going to have a look at the React library. And with that said, we are going to start with the very first lesson of this module, that is lesson 1, React Introduction, or Introduction to React Library. And the objective of this lesson is to help you understand what is React library, and to also understand the history of React library and the different versions of React, and also to help you understand how React library works in building web applications, to also help you understand some of the examples of applications that are built using React.js, and lastly, to help you understand the importance of using React library in building web applications. So with that said, let us get started with the content of this lesson. So React is simply a front-end JavaScript library for building user interface, and it is used for creating a single page applications. And when I say a single page application, what is a single page application? We have two types of web applications that you can build. So you can build a single page applications, which is called SPA, or you can build a multiple page applications. So what is the difference between these two types? A single page application is a website or a web application that loads only one main HTML page. So it is an application where we only have one HTML page, and this one HTML page will be responsible for displaying all the components and all the elements of that application. This single page applications makes the application very much faster, and performance is much increased. The multi-page application is a website where there are multiple HTML pages, and every time you click on a navigation link, the browser will load a new HTML page from the server. And because the browser loads a new HTML page from the server every time you click on a link, this slows down the application or the performance of that application. And because of that, single page applications are much faster than multiple page application. That's why React is built in order to help build single page applications. So React was created by a Facebook software engineer called Jordan Waki, and he created this framework or library to be used mainly for creating reusable components or component-based user interface for web applications. So React is alternatively also known as React.js or React.js. So if you see React or React.js or React.js the way it is written here, then it is the same thing. Now let's look at the history of React library and the different versions. React was first released in 2011, and the very first official version of React was version 0.30, which was released in 2013. And now the current and the latest version of React is version 19.00, and this version was released in 2024. And now let's look at the prerequisite before that we need to understand before we can start writing React code. The prerequisite to this module is that before you learn React, you must already have a fundamental understanding of HTML, you must have an understanding of CSS, and you must have understanding of JavaScript, and you must have also installed and set up the Node.js, which of course comes with the NPM. NPM stands for Node Package Manager. I believe our previous lessons, we have already covered the module of HTML. We have also covered the module of CSS and the module on JavaScript. We have also installed and set up Node.js on our machines. So we are now ready and set to start learning React. And with that said, let's proceed and look on how React works when you create an application using React. So when you create an HTML page, what happens is that when you run the HTML code and you load the HTML page in the web browser, what happens is that the browser first creates the DOM or the document object module. After creating the document object module, it then displays the elements of that page or the content of that page. React works a bit different from the browser, and what React does is that it works by creating a virtual DOM in the memory. So in the traditional browser, the DOM, in the traditional browser DOM, the browser updates the entire user interface when something changes. This slows down the application. For example, if you have your application which you created using the traditional JavaScript or plain JavaScript, and maybe the text on the input field changes, what will happen is that the browser will have to recreate a new document object module, and then it will recreate every element of that page and then reload the page again. And that updating of the entire user interface slows down the page and makes the page slow, especially when your application is very huge and complex. Contrary, on the other hand, what happens is that the React only creates a virtual DOM, and with the help of this virtual DOM, React is only able to update only the parts that have changed. And because it can only update the only part that have changed, it makes the user interface much faster and the application is much faster. So what happens is that React updates the parts of the UI that have changed instead of updating the entire user interface and reloading the page again. Because of that, it makes your application fast. Now let's look some of the examples of applications that have been built using the React.js library. Some of the notable applications which have been created using React.js are Facebook, Instagram, Netflix, Airbnb, and Shopify. You could also create your own React applications, and this is what we are going to do in this course. So in our future lessons, we shall see on how we can create our own React application that solves a real-world problem. Now we proceed to look on the importance, or why do we use React.js and not the normal JavaScript. Someone might ask, can't we build an application using plain HTML, CSS, and JavaScript? Yes, of course, you can create an application using plain HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but there are more advantages of using React as opposed to using plain vanilla JavaScript. So you realize that before React was created or developed by Facebook, the web developers used to create dynamic web applications with plain vanilla JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, or they could use libraries like jQuery. With this approach, managing the UI and the document object model became extremely difficult to manage. And this therefore became important that React was created to solve this problem. So with the invention of React, React was then created to solve this problem of managing user interface and managing the document object module and how to update the data and make your application interactive, more especially when your application is large and when it needs more interactivity. So the advantages of using React.js include: first, it makes your application faster in terms of performance. So faster performance using the virtual DOM. Because React is only able to update the parts that needs to be changed, it makes your application faster in performance. Number two advantage is that React is able to create components, and these components are reusable components, leading to faster development and consistent development. So you are able to create components which you can be able to use and use again or reuse in your application. In our future lessons, we will look at the concept of components, and you will have a more understanding of what a component is. The third advantage of using React library is that React makes it easy to manage the state or a state management. When we talk about state management, we are talking about data. So React makes it easy to update the data on the user interface in case of the data changes or updates, and therefore it makes your application easy to manage state and to manage data. The other advantage of using React library is that it has a large ecosystem support. So there is a huge support or a huge community of React developers and React materials that you can find online and be able to learn on your own. The other advantage of using React is that React is easy to integrate with other backend languages. For example, React is able to work well with any of the backend language that you can think about. Remember that you can build your backend using different languages. So you can build a backend API using either Node.js or Firebase or Python, or you can use Java, you can use PHP, you can use Laravel, you can use Spring Boot. So regardless of the backend framework or the backend language that you're using, React can easily integrate with all of these, and therefore it is one of the key advantages or importance of that. The other advantages of using React library is that it's a cross-platform. So with the React library, you can be able to use React to build web applications, which we use React. You can also use React to build mobile applications, and that is done by a framework called React Native. And you can also use React to build desktop applications, and that is done using the React library called Electron. So you can see that when you have an understanding of React library, then you can use React to build any of these web applications or mobile applications or desktop apps. So that is the 6 advantages of using React in building web applications. So with that said, I want to bring this lesson to an end, and then in our next lesson we will look at how to create a simple React application and how to set up a simple React applications. So with that, I want to pause here and thank you for joining this lesson, and see you in our next lesson.